Good afternoon and welcome to session 3 of the Iowa Ideas Conference. I'm your moderator, Diana Nolan, and this section is titled, I'll have to find the right sheet here, Bridging the Engagement Gap, and I will read just a little bit about it. Exposure to the arts may run plentiful for young children and older adults, but what about the time in between? This session will explore ways to strengthen a young person's journey in the arts cycle with a special focus on opportunities after college that could engage a lifelong artist, administrator, or patron. Before we go any farther, I would really love to thank our sponsor for the Iowa Ideas Conference, ITC Midwest. We really appreciate that support. So in our time together, it will include talking with our panelists and addressing audience questions, so don't be shy. And all of our sessions have closed captioning access, and all of our sessions are being recorded. So with that, I am Diana Nolan, the arts and entertainment writer at the Gazette. I have been involved in the arts scene here since 1982. So I've seen a whole lot of stuff come through our very talented, very vibrant arts scene. And so now we'll go around our panelists and let you introduce yourselves. We'll start with you, Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Hankiewicz. I'm music director of Orchestra Iowa. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Let's go to Carolee.
Hi, my name is Carolee Kerr. I'm the assistant director at the Grimes Public Library.
And Keegan.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Keegan Coletta-Huckfelt. I'm the senior production manager over at the Englert Theater in Iowa City, and I run our event operations.
Excellent. And all have a lot to offer for those of you who are watching and wanting to gain some insight. So let's see. Before we dive more deeply into the engagement gap, how do your organizations engage school children and students? Let's start with you, Tim.
Well, we have a multifaceted way of reaching out to our younger audiences, from low to small ensembles to large ensembles. So we begin with a string quartet, or in every elementary school, and I usually accompany them, plus a woodwind quintet, brass quintet, and it's also geared with the curriculum. So second grade, third grade, fourth grade get an exposure to these small ensembles. And then fifth and sixth grades, then the larger entire school district, we bust them in and perform a larger program for them with the whole orchestra. And we also have fifth grade fiddles, and where we put instructors into the schools where they give a beginning tutorial of how to play a stringed instrument. So there's a little actually practicum going on at the same time. And that sort of, in a nutshell, kind of describes what we do for our engagement to young people. We also have a family concert series, as well as something called Pied Piper, where we play to preschool children in all the area's libraries.
Excellent. How about high schoolers? What do you do for high schoolers?
So that's an interesting interesting angle that we have to attack. We do have another symphonic concert that we bring to, or we bus in students grade 7, grade 8. And after that, usually we found that our students are already engaged in their high school music programs. And so that's when yours truly goes in and actually works with programs that are already in existence in the schools.
And how about some of your ticketing kind of advantages that you have for high schoolers?
I think we have a similar structure than a lot of arts organizations do, of discount tickets and also incentives, where parents can buy multiple tickets for their students or their children. Of course, we have discounted ticket prices.
One thing that really struck me a few years ago when Emmanuel Axe was in town doing his residency, and I got to observe, I believe it was fourth graders who were bussed in for 2 concerts at the Paramount. And, it can be kind of a squirrely age. And pardon me if any of you are fourth graders watching, but they were held in rapt attention through the entire thing. And they cheered for him like he was a rock star. And I was blown away by that. Do you find that kind of engagement, that kind of attention from young audiences?
Yes, I think it's really important that we don't underestimate younger audiences. I mean, if you feed them really substantive things, they will respond. And having somebody of the caliber of Emmanuel Axe, I mean, having that superstar power, in the classical music area on stage, and to allow them to interact. This is the key. It's not just having them be passive listeners, but how can they actually participate in the performance itself? And so being able to talk to the performer, touch the performer, be up and close rather than have it, 30 feet away in the audience. I mean, all of that is a way of engaging the world of our younger audiences.
Yes, there were a number of kids who were seated on stage with him, and I believe each one had a question that they could ask as time allowed.
And really good ones, not just, when did you become interested in playing? I mean, there's some really, really impressive questioning.
Yes, and do you do any kind of little tutorial to send out to their teachers so that, I mean, what if they've never heard of Emanuel Ax? They don't know that he's one of the foremost pianists in the world in classical music. So do you do that kind of thing to help prepare the kids for who they're going to see?
Yes, we have partners in the school districts that help us out with curriculum materials, as well as in-house materials as well, that we give to the students in the schools well in advance of their visits, or in advance of their visits to us and in advance of our visits to them. That's really, having that preparatory work is really important.
Yes, I agree completely. And Carolee, in the library realm, how do you engage with young people?
In the library, we have all sorts of programs going on, story time, programming for, seeing STEM, all of that. And then outside of the library, we do outreach programs that's mostly geared towards preschool age. We can get into the local schools and the local preschools, daycare centers, and doing story times for them. But we do mostly rely on people coming to us.
Do you have America Reads or the Dolly Parton reading program, anything like that?
We don't at our library,
And where is Grimes? So in case folks aren't familiar with this town.
Grimes is a suburb of Des Moines. We're up in the northwest corner of Des Moines.
Do you do any partnering with the Des Moines Library?
Not directly, but most of the libraries in Polk County do work together. Not like direct programming, but we're all a big team. We like to champion each other. And
now in this area, this Eastern Iowa part of the state, a lot of libraries are branching out and offering more than just books. And I don't mean just books, because books are terribly important, but going beyond books to offer other experiences for readers, basically of any age, from laptops, or that you can use in the library, or even I think at North Liberty you can, and I think at Marion as well, the new library, you can check out one of those funky shaped cake pans, to bake a birthday cake that's a unicorn or Bugs Bunny or something. Do you have any kinds of auxiliary programs like that?
We do have some. Libraries have always been champions of information and access to information. And I think more and more people are realizing that information can come in so many forms, and education can come from those experiences. So being able to try out a new technology or a new piece, our new skill, is something that libraries are really embracing and really want to be a part of. By far, our most popular piece of technology is our Wi-Fi hotspots. We have about 60 of them, and they are almost always checked out with a wait list. But we do have more tech items, podcasting equipment. We have some telescopes. Our children's librarian has really embraced. She's put together backpacks that usually have a book and have a toy or a game, and then some, like a literacy kit, so that parents at home can extend the learning based on reading the story, playing with the toy, and then has some more ideas for engaging. And then it's, of course, like libraries, you're seeing a lot of, even as far as kitchen equipment, board games, yard games. It really is amazing the amount of things you can check out from your library.
And how does that intersect with the mission of a library to offer things that you wouldn't, like non-traditional items that can be checked out?
I think it's mostly, it's for us anyway. the idea that learning comes in so many different ways. It's not just what you read in a book, and that learning playing is important. It's fun, is education, it can be educational playing. But even video games or graphic novels. I remember my parents didn't really like graphic novels, us reading those, but man, there's been an explosion of just the way that you can learn from playing, from reading different formats. Audiobooks are kind of exploding, especially digital resources. Yeah.
And you have some STEAM kits, don't you?
We do. We have some for adults. We are in the process of building a new library building, which we're really excited about, because all of these technology doodads and whatnot take up a lot of space. So we fully embrace those kits for our younger patrons, and we're excited to expand that a little bit more when we have the space to do so for adults.
And then Keegan, you're in the midst of developing more programming, more outreach for students. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Englert, we're in a unique place that, unlike most other arts organizations, particularly in Eastern Iowa, that are producing houses, they make the art, they're going to build and choose exactly the programming that's happening and then bring it full-fledged. We're primarily a presenting house. So arts come through us, tours come through us, and we find a spot on our schedule to make sure that the community has access to that world. So coming out of the pandemic, like almost everyone, lots of change occurred. And we decided that was a great time to do a strategic plan and to go back and revamp everything we did. And one of the main components that came out of that was we had gotten away from having an education program at the Englert, or at least a full-fledged and fully thought out one. So we've spent the last really 18 months working on going, what can we do? What are the gaps in the market? What's the art that we serve and access that we have? So it kind of has a three-pronged approach. And frankly, some of this is just now starting to come out. So this is maybe a sneak peek at some of the information. But our first prong is for youth, specifically reaching school-age kids and going, we have these touring artists coming in that have specific interests. Like Jizza recently came by through the Englert and has an interest in playing chess. Really loves it, there's lots of articles about it. It's like, well, great, let's try to connect Jizza with the local chess group that's going to be in town and go, how can we make those connections happen, and talk about how art impacts those worlds. So finding those particular artist connection points that we can make on a yearly basis. This kind of collaboration also works when we're partnering with Hampshire, when they're doing their Infinite Dreams Festival right now, and just had Sphinx Virtuosi in town, and they did all of these residencies across all of these different schools to make sure that they're getting them out there before they had their performance in our building last night. So that's prong one. Prong two is on the opposite end of the spectrum age-wise, and going specifically targeting adults, because education isn't just for kids, it's for everybody, right? We want to make sure we're reaching that. So working on a speaker series to go, what are topics that people want to be able to engage with and create that dialogue within our communities, so how it's expanding. Then the third set of that is mainly what this session is supposed to be about, right? Particularly focusing on high school age kids and college age, and how we get them into engaged adults that either become artists, become administrators, become patrons or donors. How can we keep that line flowing? So we already have a nonfiction fellowship program that partners with the University of Iowa. And we're changing that structure up a little bit. So it's going to be more coursework focused, so that they're going to be offering specific classes that the community can participate in based off of the fellows' ideas and what they see their vision of this next year in nonfiction work. So that's going to be part of it. But then the other main part is an arts administration internship that's not geared to get kids that are going to go, you're going to do this internship and then you're going to be ready to take Tim's job. You're done. You're ready to go. But instead, what we found in our research is that there's a gap in telling people what the opportunities are to be administrators, what it takes to run a nonprofit, and that education needs to really happen. So bringing students in high school and college, out of college, reaching diverse populations, and saying, this is what a marketing director does. This is what the social media world looks like inside a nonprofit. This is what it takes to run an event. This is what the finances world are. This is what a box office world are. taking them both within our own company and showing them those intricacies, but then taking them out to the various festivals that are happening, getting them tours of the various theaters in the community so they can see a bigger gap, and then taking it a step further to go, okay, what interests you here? Nothing? Cool. Well, then you learned something, right? We gave you this opportunity. You saw this, and maybe this isn't the right place for you. But if you're really engaged in the box office world, then let's connect you to the next opportunity that maybe is another internship specific to that. Maybe it's an entry-level job at a company, but try to help our arts ecosystem in finding the next talent so that we build our leadership tree to grow our arts community.
Oh, that's so cool. Do you find that the visiting artists are open to working with students, or does it take some arm twisting?
It's a little bit of both, I'll be honest, right? Sometimes people are really open, sometimes people aren't. But I'll tell you, when we make it purposeful and we start it from the moment that we're booking them as a conversation to go, hey, we're including this extra stipend to say this is going to happen. We don't know specifically the details. I can't tell you which school it's going to be, but there's going to be this engagement opportunity. We have a lot bigger leg to stand on to make those opportunities happen. And I've never been at one of the engagements where the artist is there that they didn't have a great time and really feel good about the experience they have, even if they were grumpy when they got off their tour bus because they've been traveling for so long.
Yes,
Yeah,
Tim.
I'd love to just to comment on that. I think it's very much a generational thing. In my industry, some of our older artists weren't trained really to be educators. But I'm finding that this generation is not only well-trained, but eager to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
Well, I know you've had Joyce Yang in town. She's so effervescent. I just adore her.
Yeah.
And she's been out to a variety of kind of outreach programs, hasn't she?
Correct. She performed a recital for us here for the community, and tomorrow she's going to be working with some University of Iowa students. And there's some other and on Monday we have one of our education concerts where we're busing all these students in to actually see her perform, because what she does is superhuman. So it's to put the human face on something that I think we take for granted, certainly in my industry, that we can just turn on music whenever, wherever we want, and we've forgotten that it's a human endeavor. And so when they see somebody really excelling at what they do, to connect the dots between, the arts are a living, breathing, it's about the human condition rather than a flat screen. I mean, that is really an important connection to make.
She's a very engaging, visually engaging performer as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tim's so right, though. There's just a difference when you get kids in a room with an artist and they can physically see the thing, what engagement and opportunities that opens up for them. But I say kids, but I think that's true for everybody, right? And the pandemic didn't help us in terms of education and engagement, that people got so used to staring. I mean, we're doing it now, but we got so used to staring at a screen and being able to communicate. And that's amazing because it creates opportunities to see things and connect across distances that were never possible before. But it also doesn't replace the value of being in a room with somebody and getting to experience that live art that occurs.
Why is it important to lay a foundation for young people, for youth, students?
Well, no, Carolee, you go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, for us, it's we want them to be members of this community. We want them to stay here and to learn and then to give back as adults. So I think it's just part of, we want them to engage with this community.
Yeah. It's our future. Really, I mean, it's investing in our future. We don't have a purpose if we don't have an audience. And also it's also to help make our community, in terms of community building, it's also to help round out people to be really great members of society, to build a better place to live. It's not just that we provide great amenities to make our community a great place to live. It's also to help mold the people who will of the future who will make this a great place to live.
Yeah, I mean, the data is out there about what arts and culture do for communities and how they teach people to think and operate in the world. So, of course, there's massive value in that. But I mean, Tim and I function in buildings and present our arts in buildings that have been around for over 100 years, right? And so I know it's part of our mission and model to make sure that the Englert is presenting art for as long as possible and to uphold the legacy of that. But in order to do that, we have to continue to invest and give people make them see the reason why the art is so valuable and why they have to continue to show up. And then from a particular point, we're massive economic drivers too, right? So if we don't continue to create the next artists, the next administrators, and the next patrons, that economic driver goes away and the community has to replace that in some facet.
And I saw something come across Facebook as a meme. It pops up every now and then, that music is not just about notes. It is math. It is all, it just covers the whole gamut of education. And so, Tim, can you speak a little bit about how
Sure.
studying music enriches a person, whether they're going to pursue it or be like me and pick up my saxophone every now and then, or sit at the piano every now and then?
Well, I mean, it stimulates the different parts of the brain at the same time. I mean, it's tactile, it's auditory. Actually, Joyce Young, who we were just talking about, I learned that she has synesthesia, which is equating color with sound, which is, also very interesting. But even in your studies, you have to know your history to understand the context of it, of the music that you're playing. You have to understand the theory of it so you can create it. You also have to understand the mathematics of it. Mathematics and music are the same because they both describe relationships. And, music, when they say music is a language, it is true, because as I'm speaking to you, my voice is going up and down in a hopefully natural manner. And that's the difference between somebody playing the notes and somebody playing music. They're playing the phrase and the melody in a communicative way that has variety, like speech. And so whether you're performing it, whether you're listening it, and certainly when you're studying it, you are just engaging so many different parts of the brain.
It's also a great communications tool. If you are a traveler, you may go to a country where you don't begin to speak the language, but everybody there can enjoy the same piece of music if they're at a concert together. And I've experienced that time and time again in being fortunate enough to travel and play music. Food,
music, language. Those are the three sort of fundamental groupings that make a unique culture.
Well, looking around audiences, I see lots of people who are more established in their lives and have more disposable income. So how do you try to involve people in the early stages of building their careers and families?
Yeah, so I mean, I think part of that is getting them when they're young and driving that engagement so that they want to make sure they're coming back and to see the value in the arts. That means making student tickets, right? So we have a big push to go, there's always a student ticket option. We're always going to try to find a way to get people in here. It also means we have to be reaching out to the specific communities. Like you said, Diana, if we don't want our patronage to die and to leave us on, we have to be engaging, going to the neighborhoods that are happening and bringing art directly to them, going to them to get them to come into our building, and then bringing a more diverse set of programming as well. I know Tim and I talked about this a little bit when we were prepping for this. So I'll throw that baton to him.
Oh, well, you're speaking to the choir. I think the real challenge for anybody in the performing arts is fostering the culture of attendance. And I think often we fall into the trap of just marketing to segments, whether it's youth or, high schoolers or young adults or adults. And we don't connect the dots very well. I know many parents, for example, who insist on their children having music lessons, for example, but they don't take them to concerts, missing the whole point of it. So how, and this is, I do not have a good answer for this, but the main effort for at least people in my industry needs to be, how do you encourage more effectively for parents to feel comfortable to bring their children and their students to everything that we do, not just stuff that's marketed as family concerts, but everything that we do. And that is a hard nut to crack, because it's like filling the ocean one cup at a time, because this is a continental cultural issue.
Which brings me to a question I had a little farther down. Let me see if I can find it. What are the differences between cultivating audiences in the US versus Europe?
Well, if you were to go into a concert hall in Europe, you'll be struck by the diversity of age. You'll see people from 8 to 98. Whereas here, for some reason, you'll see younger children coming to programs that have been programmed for them. And yet our audiences tend to be empty nesters or close to empty nesters. So they were engaged as children, they were interested in it, and then they went and had their own lives, they had children, and by the time they have disposable income and time, they become engaged again. That gap it doesn't really exist in Europe, but it does exist here. And I don't know why, because it seems to be, people understand it with sports. I mean, they will take the whole family to a ball game, to a football game, whatever. It's totally natural. And I don't know where in society that we kind of put up the barriers that, you shouldn't be coming to our concerts until you have chest hair. I don't know. That is just one thing that I've constantly had to battle throughout my entire career. And I think in the classical arts, I mean, we've done a particularly poor job of that over the last 40 years, and we're reaping the unfortunate benefits of that.
Thing that I noticed in 2000, Chorale Midwest traveled to Russia for performances, and we also attended performances. And I remember there was an evening. It had Shostakovich and Rimsky-Korsakov and some of my absolute favorite. I love the wild Russian composers. And there were in front of me some really elderly women who were just standing up through the whole concert, clapping and just so engaged in it. And I thought, it is for the masses in Europe, because these are people without much income. There's a whole generation they call Russian mothers who their husbands and sons were killed in wars, and they used to receive a stipend under communist rule. And now that that's not happening, they don't receive a government stipend. So money for them is a huge issue. And also in a country where the arts were clamped down and not encouraged for such a long time. But
right.
Boy, are they robust now, and they just love their art.
Well, it's the arts as social glue.
Yeah.
Which really include, but it's also the arts as habit. I mean, this is getting back to my original point, is that there are a lot of cultures that people were introduced to the arts and attended regularly with their parents, and it became into a natural habit, and it gets stronger the older you get. And so that's why it's so important to engage our audiences when they're young. But how do you keep them engaged from high school to 45? That is the critical question.
For at least a good decade, if not more, when you had Bruce Orchestra out on the front lawn of Brucemore to kick off the season, how did that programming evolve? Because it did change over the years.
Sure. It only changed towards the very end, but what I loved about Brucemore was a safe place for people who think that they didn't like classical music, because we have this baggage that you think you have to dress up and you have to know things, which is just nonsense. But to be able to listen to music under the stars, have your kids run around, eat, talk to your neighbor, and not get the stink eye from somebody else. I mean, that is a safe environment for people to actually enjoy the occasion, but also hear the sort of the standard repertoire that we play, so that you can hear it with better fidelity in a concert hall. I mean, that was an important that was the important genesis of Brucemore. And towards the very end, because it was a very expensive program to do, there was pressures to actually change it to be more popular in its appeal, to sell tickets for the moment, which is important, but it was really undermining the long-term audience development idea of what it was originally designed for.
So what do you say to parents who have young kids and they're afraid that they might be squirmy, so they might be reluctant to come into the Paramount, which is such a glorious building and has a kind of formal look about it?
Yep.
What do you say to young families and parents who are like mortified that their kid might make some noise or want to dance in the aisle?
First, welcome. You are welcome. Second, if you're concerned about your child getting squirmy, which happens, find a seat that's near an exit so you can actually take them out and calm them down and bring them back or not. I mean, it's really important and it's really important for our audience to see, yes, there's the next generation right there, so they should be celebrated, not discouraged.
Well,
How about you, Keegan? Do you see? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finished?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think it's that re-education though, right? We're
Yeah.
re-educating both our patrons and our ushers, our volunteers, everybody to go, it's not just an exclusive thing. Some art is better than no art. So it's better to bring a kid that's going to be interested and engaged for that first act of a show and then have them step out. And if that's it, then that's it. But that's okay too, because you're still getting that access and emotion.
And how about in the library realm where we grew up with, shh, you must be very quiet. Are libraries still very quiet?
No, no, not at all. And I think we don't fight that issue as much as I think Tim and Keegan, you probably do. Just thinking from my own experience as a mother of young children, I think the fear of what the other audience members think of me is what keeps me from. So when you were talking about letting your ushers know and the other audience members that this is the future and we need them here. That is a big hurdle for me. But no, libraries are not quiet places, and I think you only need to walk into one to see that. Thinking about so one of the things that we do, and about 75 other libraries in Iowa participate in, is this Adventure Pass. And I'm sitting here, so briefly what that is a way for library patrons to visit zoos, museums, science center, children's museums, art museums, using their library card. And it's something that our library started, and I just, listening to both of you talk makes me want to go out and try and build those relationships. I know the Cedar Rapids Library had a partnership with the opera so that their patrons could get tickets using their library card. And so trying to help, libraries can help with that. It's just a matter of building those relationships and figuring out a way to make it work with other organizations.
Now, does it give them a discount on tickets or free admission, or is it up to the venue?
It is free to the library patrons. The library itself pays for usually a family pass. So for example, for the blank Part Z, the library pays for the pass. And then there are parameters that the venue can set up, and we can do all of that. But it allows the patron, they go with their library card to a website and reserve a pass for a certain date. And it is free for the library members.
That is such a cool program. Is it popular? Do people know about it?
Libraries aren't great marketers. We're getting better. Every single new card that we issue, we tell people that this is what your library card can get you, not just what you see right here, but here's the things you can get online. We are always talking to more libraries about joining it and trying to promote it.
That is so cool.
We love it. I love the Adventure Pass and the things that it can bring to our patrons.
It makes me feel like I need to write about it. Let more
Me
people
too.
know about it. Okie doke. So how did the pandemic affect your, well, I should read what I wrote, affect your efforts to stay connected?
Well, I mean, I think it completely changes that. It changed everybody's operations, right? So we at the Englert, I wasn't here at the time, but they switched to doing a podcast and virtual performances like just about everybody else, trying to make sure that art was getting out there. I think the biggest point, though, is how it changed it coming out of the pandemic, right? So it provided an opportunity, and I think almost every arts organization that is still functioning coming out of the pandemic did this, at least in Eastern Iowa. And I'm really proud to live in an ecosystem that did this, that when what we were doing wasn't working, now it's not going to continue to move. So how do we recreate and reform? So we identified that same gap that Tim was talking about, that 19 to 45, right? How do we build and grow there? So our amazing programming team just built a new series called Track Zero that's specifically targeting that gap, to go, okay, let's put real money and real backing into audience development so that they see shows that want to engage them, that then make them want to come to the English specifically for shows. So some of those are in our building, some of them aren't in our building, but getting a clean slate and some time to really rethink about what it is we're doing, how we're serving our mission, and how we're serving our communities.
Tim, what did the orchestra do to keep connected, especially when we were all climbing the walls sitting at home?
Sure. Well, actually, before I assign that, I mean, before I address that, I mean, we still don't know the full ramifications of COVID.
Yeah.
I think when we came back online, we had a huge spike of enthusiastic audiences, and then it went away again. I think people are used to staying home, and that's a real problem, not just for obviously, for any of the arts and nonprofits. So what we did during the pandemic, we were different, actually, the way we handled the pandemic, because a lot of people were just worried about losing touch with their audiences. And in the musical field, when you have screens like this where you have performances that look like the Brady Bunch, of people doing symphonies and stuff like that, they were terrible. I mean, they didn't sound good. And the orchestras who did them had to put in a ton of resources in terms of development and technology and all that great stuff. And so while that helped them upgrade their usage of technology, it wasn't doing us any favors in audience building. What we did is I had a happy hour in which I opened up my phone and I started calling up all the guest artists who've been here in the last 10 years. And they didn't have anything else to do either. And so we talked about what the life of, how you doing? How are you managing this unprecedented time? And so that was interesting, that it kept our core audiences interested and engaged, but it didn't undermine our own the quality of what we do. And I think a lot of orchestras kind of really regret trying to put something online that it wasn't really well developed for.
About monetizing it, because in the beginning, a lot of the online programming was offered free, but places that had a venue that still had electrical bills and heating and cooling bills and salaries to pay, and or musicians who were performing over the lunch hour from their home and doing concerts started asking for tips. So how crucial was monetizing the online programming?
I think that will go down in history as the biggest failure in the arts. Was that I can only when we were performing some things online, licensing is an issue. And when in Facebook, there are these algorithms that are following around what you're playing, and we got shut down several times because they thought we were some other orchestra playing something that was already pre-recorded when it was really our own stuff. And of course we would fight them later, but when you're being shut down mid conversation because they think you're violating copyright, does not really help your audience viewership. Mm-hmm. So monetizing it was not helpful. I mean, it really wasn't a possibility for us, at least.
Coach Keegan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean,
I know you've been involved with other organizations, arts presenters as well.
Yeah, I first 100% agree with Tim. I think it was a large mistake. I'm not sure how you could make a different decision at the time, right? It was a little bit of people being pushed into a corner about what to do and how to do. And the arts certainly I believe the arts got us through part of that world. They weren't the only thing that got us through, but it helped our mental health so much to be able to engage and see things that were still live and active and happening, and not just things that have been previously recorded in a can. So really big positives, but a negative is that people learned that they could access art and they shouldn't have to pay for it. And art does in fact have a cost to it. And that's a double-edged sword, because when we talk about education and engagement, a lot of the times there is a point in going, but we have to get this down to a place that it is free, but it's never actually free, right? There always are donors and businesses and sponsors coming in to help cover the expenses so that it actually can happen and so that we can reach that new audience and give to them. So yeah, we're not out of it.
People are so shocked to know that the performing arts is actually a business.
Yeah, they just think a nonprofit money falls from the sky and lands on your head, lands at your feet, and all is well.
I often joke on our roof that we have a little money tree, and I just climb up the ladder, unlock the lock, and I can start picking the leaves. I wish it worked like that, but it doesn't.
Oh,
that's part of our responsibility.
Flipping from that tree.
Yeah, right.
To plant in my own yard. How about the library? How did you keep engaged with patrons when your doors were shut?
We did similar. We did a lot of online programming. We did, instead of, come to the library and do this craft, we put together kits, constantly having bags that first they were sitting outside the building and people would come up and grab them. And then it came to, okay, now you can come in, but we're still not going to do these activities in the library. You're going to take it home with you. So it was a lot of story time to go, story time online, but then we also ran into copyright issues because constantly keeping track of which publishers would allow us to read on Facebook, or for how long could you keep the video alive. And then we ran into a little bit of, didn't we all run into Zoom fatigue? Like, especially when kids went back to school that fall. I know my own kids were doing online school, and we just really saw a drop in participation. Even though the library was back open, we weren't doing programming. Again, because of our space constraints here at our library, we didn't feel comfortable having people in the library in our confined spaces. And so it was a real drop. And just listening to our youth librarians talk about how this year they're really seeing numbers back to normal or pre-pandemic levels. So we're lucky in the sense that people don't usually forget about the library. They come back, but there was a dip.
Tim, did the orchestra put together any virtual programming for schools? I know Red Cedar Chamber did and Cedar Rapids Opera did. Did you guys as well?
We did not. We are subject to a national collective bargaining agreement that puts some hurdles to prevent that from happening.
Oh, interesting. So what, coming out, what are you retaining from the pandemic presentations? Or what have been, so first that, and then what were maybe some of the upsides that you're seeing?
Yeah, so coming from a different arts organization in the area and to being where I am now, I'll say the biggest thing I saw happen in the pandemic is the true belief of rising water floats all boats. So when we come together to work with each other, not just arts organizations, but all community service organizations, that's when we start to really see the major impact of the work, reaching additional families, reaching additional communities, and being able to make sure that the art is not only having tickets sold so that it can pay for itself and have a longevity in that life, but it's actually doing the mission work that it needs to do. So things like our annual production of Nutcracker that happens with Nolte Dance Academy, right? But continuing to grow that in outside partnerships with that. We're doing Werner Herzog on Sunday is coming and doing a speech at the Englert, which is sold out, unfortunately. But that's 5 organizations that are coming together to put that on. That's the capstone of several festivals that are going on. So the more we can do that kind of work, the bigger outreach opportunities that we have. And I saw that during the pandemic, and something I'd love to see continue is spreading across 380, right? Cedar Rapids and Iowa City really working together. We talk about that being a cultural corridor, but oftentimes that highway and interstate is a big divider and keeping people apart. And it doesn't have to be. So.
Tim, any upsides from the pandemic presentations? Anything you're continuing that you saw, well, that kind of worked, let's keep doing that?
For us, actually, it was a mixed thing. I really thought happy hour was going to be continue to be a regular part of our offering because it was really successful during the pandemic. And what we found was viewer fatigue, Zoom fatigue. And so we saw that was not, while it was very successful for us for those 2.5 years, actually, it turned out to be not quite so successful now that life is quote unquote normalized. But I think I totally agree with Keegan that the mother's milk of creativity is partnerships, and partnerships are hard, by the way. I mean, to find out what the different organizations, what are your strengths, what can you do together that you can't do by yourself, and how do you do it in a way that each organization carries their responsibilities. And I mean, don't just think that partnerships are pie in the sky, easy fun. No, in fact, it's hard work, but the benefits are always worth it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the other lesson off of that, Tim, that you and I talked a little bit about is knowing where our lanes are. I don't need at the Englert, as we were building our new education program, I didn't need to copy things that are already existing. That doesn't serve the community. It doesn't serve my organization. If I believe in that work that's happening, the question should go to those organizations. What can I be doing to help you further this mission? And how can we work together to make it have a broader reach? And sometimes I think we get so idea focused when we're thinking artistically that we lose sight of we can't actually get farther if we just ask questions and work together instead of trying to reinvent the wheel.
Right. Well, I would imagine that financing plays into some of that. Who's going to pay for all this? Are you going to split it evenly? Who's getting the audiences? Who's getting people in the seats? And what's equitable? Do all of those things enter into the picture with collaborations?
Of course.
That being said, if people are actually coming to the table wanting it to happen, those are usually sub points that can easily be solved. That tends to be the thing that comes up when someone doesn't actually want to collaborate.
Correct.
Which is more of a pre-pandemic thing than a post-pandemic thing in my experience.
And I'm seeing the collaboration so beautifully playing out in Iowa City this week with Hancher initiating the Infinite Dream Festival, but it's intersecting with the book festival, the City of Literature's book festival, the Refocus Festival at Film Scene. Everybody's got like a crossover piece, and Hancher taking the artists out into different venues, from the Englert to the Senate chamber at Old Capitol, and involving a dance partnership between the literacy, I think maybe Writers Workshop and the School of Dance. Those kinds of, everybody bringing their best to the table just seems like that's going to be a way to kind of fill in those gaps. And maybe do you think that's going to be more important as we move on?
I think it's essential to the art survival in our communities. Because at some point there's a donor fatigue that happens too. We talk about Zoom fatigue and patron fatigue, but the donor fatigue is real. So if we're not pooling our resources and using that money to the farthest it can reach out, we will stop being able to innovate. It just does end up being a breaking point.
By the way, I want to just say, what does innovate mean? I mean, it means a lot of things, but to me, it means, how do you get the art to the stage? That's the creative process. I mean, the audiences love, hopefully, what's going on stage. It's getting it to the stage that takes the creativity, and that's the hard work.
And also the advantages of coming together after so much time spent watching any kind of presentation from your living room couch on the laptop set up on your desk, your improvised office at home, versus getting people back under the same roof. First, they have to be comfortable being under the same roof, but there have to be advantages to experiencing the arts together.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that there is something so valuable about putting people in a room to be able to experience, interact with each other, talk about it as they're leaving the theater. Oh, that's just one of those magical things, to stand in a lobby and listen to people talking about a show they just saw. It's priceless.
There is something true to be said that there's in a great performance, there's an electricity between stage and audience, and that's just something that you just can't really capture on screen. And I think that's when people are breathing at the same time, and where sometimes dramatic silence can be overwhelming than any sound could be. I mean, that is, and you can also tell, you can even stand-up comedians know when they have flop sweat, when things aren't going well, because they're not getting any reaction or any electricity from the audience. I mean, live performing arts is a dance between artist and audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That gets back to your question earlier, Diana. It's why it's so essential, not only for us to take art into the schools and to meet people in their communities. That is absolutely important. But then getting them to come to the theater too. So busing them in, getting those school groups in there so the kids experience that electricity and they want to go home and talk about it and they want to recreate it. And then we have to follow up as the administrators with more opportunities for those families to bring them back to the theater to capitalize on that engagement.
What about reaching out to underserved populations, whether it's across cultural lines or economic lines, neighborhoods that traditionally might not feel like they can go to a concert hall, and yet they need to experience the arts and just as much, if not more, than others? I guess there's a question in there.
Yeah. Well, I think anybody, when they come to an experience, want to see themselves reflected in what's going on stage. If they can see themselves in the art that's being presented, you are reaching everyone. And it's really important. The symphonic industry, we've been criticized, and rightly so, for being pretty monochromatic over the years, and male, and that is changing. And one way of doing it, one meaningful way to do that, is to make sure that some of the artists that we present represents a variety of cultures. The music that we present represents a variety of cultures, so people can actually say, hey, that you're speaking to me through your music.
And you've done some non-traditional programming in the last year, as I recall. I don't remember everything I've written, but I know that you have reached across musical genres.
Sure. Well, I mean, how much time do you have? But I mean, we've had everyone from like Stuart Goodyear, who is an incredible, one of the world's leading pianists, a person of color, but also Joel Thompson. We had him here, and we performed his 7 Words of the Unarmed, which is an incredibly powerful piece. And by the way, don't underestimate it. It takes courage as well to do programming like this. I mean, unfortunately, there are still elements of our community that aren't supportive of that kind of thing. And so when you have to stand up and say, no, this is the right thing to do, you will win in the long term in terms of your audience support if you do these kinds of performances.
How do you get out, Carolee, into how do you get books into hands of kids who might not normally come to the library?
It's a lot of working with the school, working with local organizations, churches are a good partner. Just letting people know what is available. It's a challenge because we have sometimes our policies work against us. We're constantly looking at what are we doing that is a barrier to access. So even something as simple as, do you need a parent to sign up for your library card? Because sometimes, especially in the summer, we're seeing kids come to the library and they want to borrow material, but maybe their parent isn't able to get there. So is that important? Does a parent need to? You have to weigh the cost there. But we're constantly trying to think of ways that we can remove those barriers to access. But it's really knowing other organizations in the community that can help spread that word of what we have available.
Do you find you're having more e-readers, or people who want to listen to books on tape or whatever is the latest technology?
Do we have more of them?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yes, digital materials are incredibly popular, and expensive for libraries. So it's balancing, what do we have that's the digital, but then also not everyone has access to a the technology to listen to them or to view them. We still buy DVDs, we still buy audiobooks on CD, and you'll have people saying, well, no, but cars don't have CD players in it anymore, or everybody has an iPhone or a smartphone, which is not true. So we have to still fight for, where do we spend our budget? Yes, digital materials are very, very popular, but also so are physical materials. Trying to balance everything.
So who is your funding stream? I mean, who helps finance libraries?
It mostly comes from the city, from taxes. We do get some from the state and some from the county. Most of it is from the city, but we do have donors as well to our Friends organization.
And so how do you cultivate a new generation of donors? You've got your people just out of school, they're embarking on their careers. Kids are expensive. So how do you encourage philanthropy at a time when people might think they don't have any extra dollars to give?
Boy, that is a really good question. I was in the last session about fundraising, and it is a challenge. We are building a new library, and we were fundraising for that. And one of the challenges, we started this process over 10 years ago, and we worked with a fundraising company then, and they said, you're not going to raise the money. Grimes is not, people don't think of Grimes as their home. They live here because it's close to Des Moines and they work in Des Moines. But people don't feel that connection to Grimes yet. You need to wait a couple years. And so it's working to, if nothing is black and white. So it's working community development so that people feel like this is their home and will want to keep the library alive, to support their parks, to support all of that. It is definitely a challenge.
Now, you asked like the central question that's really, really difficult to answer. And of course, this all comes back to that gap between the 20 and 45-year-olds. I mean, you need to constantly make your case to the same people throughout their entire lifetime so that over their lifetime, they see the value of what you do. And so building that entire lifetime of relationships is the key for philanthropic support. And then I'll also finally say that a building is important and it's great, but it's what goes on inside the building that's even more important, which sometimes is the hardest case to make. In that you need to make, the support needs to go for the activity, and the building helps that activity, and that is a very difficult question.
And now, Tim, the Paramount is the home of the orchestra, but do you pay rent? Because the Paramount is not owned by the orchestra.
Correct. There's an unusual and long history where Mr. Bezanson gave the Paramount to the symphony, and then the symphony gave it to the city for $1, and the city has hired Venue Works to manage the facility. We certainly do get the brother rate, which certainly helps our overhead expenses. So there is a special relationship between the Orchestra Iowa and the Paramount Theater that most orchestras do not enjoy with the venues that they perform in.
And then when you go on the road, like to Coralville or Hampshire, or back when the horrible flood years where you had to find any place to perform. So do you pay like a rental fee or something like that to the venue?
Yes, that's important. I mean, they've got to make a living they have to keep their doors open as well.
And I think that's something that maybe people don't understand or think about.
And that's exactly what I was going to say, Diana. I think when you're talking about building donors and philanthropy, I think we have come to a place in our society where transparency is key. We have to draw the curtain back and actually show people what the expenses are and how we get from point A to point B to point C. I manage our rentals at the Englert, and we are by far the cheapest renter in the area. And it's because we're not trying to make money, we're just trying to cover our expenses. But even at doing that, it's still so expensive to operate a theater. It just is. So we have to do that. And then we have to make sure that people feel like it's a safe place that they do call their home, like Carolee was saying.
Now, do you cultivate, we have 1 minute left, so do you cultivate young people as volunteers in hopes of then turning them into paying patrons and audience members?
Yes, is the 1 minute answer to that question.
And I'm not supposed to ask yes or no questions, but
I think obviously it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who have who have had the experience of learning to sing, learning to play an instrument, being acting in their school plays and the like. I mean, if they've touched the arts, I mean, that is sort of the entrance way into their relationship, volunteerism with your organization.
excellent. Any last thoughts, Carolee?
Just libraries are here to help. So whatever we can do to help get people in your seats, we're happy to help.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your participation, and I hope our listeners come away with renewed energy, some tips for helping them in their endeavors, and sparking an interest in, hey, it's not just about sitting in the seats, although that's the big part. There are other ways in which to engage.